All right, we'll hit it.
Okay.
Stragglers can come. All right, I'm going to open with a word of prayer, and then we'll dive in. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time to gather, to continue to dive into some fascinating topics in your church. And thank you for bringing us together. And we ask that you would be glorified in our discussions and just be with us here tonight. In your name, amen.
Amen.
All right, the 3 C's: converge, congregationalism, and the Constitution. Yes, we like. Congregationalism. Yes, and the Constitution. We like alliteration here at this church.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? All right, jumping in. Many people may know or may not know what Converge is. That is the organization that our church is a part of, affiliated with. And so it really started way back when, in the mid-19th century, with Swedish Baptists moving into the United States. Yay! Yeah! Yeah! You betcha. Yeah, so in the mid-1800s, right, these Swedes sought to establish churches and emphasize the believer's baptism, right, and started evangelical outreach. And they wanted congregational, there's the Constitution if you want one. They wanted congregational governance. So formation of the Baptist General Conference happened in 1879. And that started moving across, central, the Midwest, right, into more Swedish-speaking communities and up into Minnesota. And then the shift to Converge happened in 2008. So BGC was, prevalent, Baptist General Conference. For a long time, that was what people were familiar with. And so Converge happened in 2008, and that was sort of the rebranding under a broader evangelical identity. Now we have Converge North Central, and that is the specific branch that we're under, and that is with Minnesota, Iowa, and the Dakotas, and they're serving churches in our region specifically, focused on church planting and growth, and the district has been active in bringing new churches. It's really cool to see on their website how many, foreign language churches are coming into Converge. Spanish and even broader Asian language churches are coming into Converge in our area. So that's really cool. Also, Converge has a really strong mission focus and emphasizing global mission and church revitalization and leadership training. So they have great resources on their website to help churches bolster themselves. So we are actively taking advantage of those connections. Just to highlight a few churches in the metro, Berean, St. Paul Baptist, or Central Baptist, Chapel Hill, Christ Redeemer, City Church in Minneapolis, Community of Nations Church in Roseville, Eagle Brook, Hiawatha, Hillside, Mill City Church, Restoration, Resurrection. So there's a whole list, Wooddale. And I also put a key down at the bottom with female pastor and non-traditional elder board. And I highlighted those just for the fact that Converge doesn't dictate those things for the individual churches. So within Converge, there's a number of churches that have female pastors or non-traditional boards. So within
some of those that have the non-traditional board, you highlighted the ones that have lead pastors as women.
Yes.
There are lots of them that have pastoral women, but happen to be led by a man, but allow pastoral for all women.
Yeah.
But they happen to be led by a man right now.
Yes.
So more of them in there actually allow women in all pastoral roles than what that key shows right now.
Yeah. And a sampling, so there's, again, traditional churches or traditional, right? Churches that have structure of senior pastor as men and the elder board within Converge, and then there's churches that are doing other types of leadership structures. So moving into Converge and congregationalism. So looking more toward why Converge is kind of set up to this. So Converge holds a modified form of congregationalism, excuse me, it's a long word, that each church holds its autonomous and self-governing, and that church voluntarily cooperates in the broader network for mutual support and accountability for mission work. So it helps create a local church autonomy, and each converged church makes its own decisions regarding leadership and doctrine within the evangelical beliefs. That holds its church the finances and ministry strategies that the church wants to own. There's no hierarchical authority up to Converge authority dictating like the policies to the local church. So Converge doesn't dictate those authority down to the local churches. It's a voluntary association with Converge, so we're voluntarily, associating with them, and they're voluntarily associating with us. So those are two things that are like mutual relationship happening. Evangelical unity, so converged churches share core theological beliefs, particularly around the authority of Scripture and the gospel and the mission of the church, but they have flexibility in secondary issues. So there's a mission-driven cooperation amongst that too, right? Converge encourages churches to work together in planting new churches and supporting global missions, in training leaders and demonstrating a balance between autonomy and interdependence. So to dive into what is congregationalism, it's a form of church governance in which each local church is independent and self-governing. So it emphasizes the autonomy of the local congregation. Decisions about doctrine and worship and leadership and church policies are made by the members themselves. Commonly associated with Protestant traditions, and it grew out of the Reformation in England and brought over with Puritans in New England. Do you want to speak to Poldity?
Oh, yes. So if you come from different backgrounds, this might be different than what you knew as a younger person in a different kind of a church. So the Roman Catholic Church is an example of monarchical. Strict hierarchy, Pope decides, things come down. Churches are required to live by those encyclicals and things that come out. That would be like what the Roman Catholics do. Episcopalian has a loose hierarchy. United Methodist would be an example of this. My brother's a United Methodist pastor. There's a rules book. There's a book of discipline. There's a judicial council. There are things like that they have to adhere to, and it comes down from the top. They have to actually split as well because of an issue in the United Methodist Church. There's the Global Methodists and the USA Methodists, because they couldn't come to a decision, leadership couldn't come to a decision. But that one, you're expected to adhere to what your denomination says in that one. Then there's the Presbyterian one, authorities vested in a regional elected hierarchy. Lutherans tend towards this one a little bit more, like regions have their own say over what your doctrine will be. The Lutheran synods, you probably know there's like Missouri Synod, and there's Wells, which is the Wisconsin Synod, there's ELCA. Lutherans are a little bit more in this, and of course Presbyterian. Some of the Presbyterians are this way, they split as well, so there's two different kinds of that as well in the Presbyterian. How that differs from what we do, we are a congregationalist church. BGC, or Converge as it's now called, has always just been they call themselves an association of affiliated churches. So it's not a denomination in the same way that some of these are. There is no strict hierarchy of any kind. They have a very broad evangelical base of what the statement of faith is. For if you look at their statement of faith, that's what we hold to. They have a wide variety of doctrines under that statement of faith. So you will find in the BBC Church people that are strictly Reformed and Calvinist, and you will find people that are way out on the other side, close to Anabaptist, all within the Converge denomination, because we have no hierarchy. And so there is nobody at Converge. So if you think about Southern Baptists, and this is part of why BGC went to Converge, is that when people say the word Baptist, there are preconceived ideas of what that means. And they wanted to get away from that because that is not what the BGC was. Southern Baptists, while they are somewhat congregational, they also have I think it's called the Baptist Statement of Faith or something that they update every now and then, and all churches have to live within that Baptist Statement of Faith. We don't have anything like that. That's not what this is. As long as we stay in those basics of the evangelical Statement of Faith, who is Jesus, who is God, the Trinity, I forgot what some of the other, there's like 5 of them there. As long as we stay within those, we are fine within the Converge Church. We choose to be there, and we can choose to leave at any point within Converge. What congregationalism here means is there's 2 or 3 basic things. One is there has to be some form of congregational participation. So typically what we see within Converge is we choose our senior pastor, and then we have to elect some kind of a governing body of some kind, and we have to have believers' baptism by immersion. That's it. That's all that they require of us to be, other than that general statement of faith. So that's what differs from those hierarchy things there. Like those kinds of decisions are not made at the congregational level in those other churches. So if you came from a Lutheran church and you're used to something very different, or a Methodist church, that's why. We have a completely different form of polity government.
I thought I had a slide on that.
I think you do later.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe somewhere. Okay. Any questions so far on Converge congregationalism?
One of the things, and I think Bob brought it up earlier, presented here, one of the things that, so the Swedish Baptists were known as something called pietists, and they had like 10 things that made them what they were. And some of it was that they wanted to have a looser hold on doctrinal issues, minor doctrinal issues. So they had to agree to the basics of things. But then they wanted to, and Bob brought it up, the irenic spirit, which I've heard many times because I went to Bethel as well. It says, they sought to cultivate a spirit of peace and unity within their own communities and with other Christians, even those with differing theological perspectives. So it wasn't, we're not going to divide over things that are not those central things of the statement that we hold in our statement of faith. Other than that, we're not going to divide over things. That was the irenic spirit of the pietists who started the Baptists here in the USA. And that's where the foundations of our church.
Yeah. So like, I think Laurie touched on some of these things, but like zeroing in on congregational leadership, congregation membership, the entire membership has say on the important decisions as hiring pastors, setting budgets, doctrinal stances, and significant church initiatives. Business meetings are common, and that's where people vote, right? The pastor is the spiritual leader responsible for preaching, teaching, and pastoral care. And the pastor does not have ultimate authority, the congregation, but serves at the will of the congregation. So like, as we get down into our Constitution, we start to see these themes come up. So councils or boards, a group of elected members assists in practical matters such as finances, member care, and facility maintenance. Deacons may also provide spiritual leadership in some churches. So again, committees, congregational churches use committees, finance committees, missions worship to handle specific areas of church life. And these committees report to the congregation as a function of advisory groups. And there's no higher governing authority. And Laurie spoke to this, right? Unlike monarchical, episcopal, or Presbyterian systems, they do not answer, congregationalist churches do not answer to higher denominational authority. They voluntarily associate with networks, EGC, Converge. So, foundation of a constitution as we move into this. Essentially, what a constitution is, a document that provides a governance structure and operations, ensuring orderly and efficient functioning of an organization, right? And specifically for churches, it helps with protection from legal and internal disputes. So it helps give us a purpose and direction, a governance structure outlines some of those things. Legal protection, internal order and clarity, so how our members function, what dictates membership and leadership structures. Also legal compliance, so if we are a 501c3, which we are, like what does that mean for state and federal laws? Our current constitution is divided into a constitution and bylaws. And what is the difference? Constitution establishes the core governing principles of the organization, and the scope is broad and foundational. The constitution's rarely changed. Within our constitution, we have the name and the purpose of the organization, our statement of faith, membership qualifications, governance structure, and how to change the amendments to the Constitution. Our bylaws, we have it provides the specific procedures for how the church functions. It has more detailed of like how we run things, and it's subject to change as needed. The leadership roles and responsibilities of different functions and the committees are in there, as well as more detailed process of membership, and our financial policies and decision-making processes are in our bylaws. Here. Do you want to copy the Constitution? Or are you just going to share it? Okay. So now we can get into some of the meat of the document, if you will. I just highlighted, like, I'm going to go through and highlight some of the pieces within the document, and we can talk about them as we want, ask questions, and have a conversation. Essentially, the elder role, it's referenced in two places: the Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, as well as in the bylaws, Article 2, Section 1. So you can read it in your documents or on the screen. But you can see here, in the current Constitution, it is the elder board is made to be the leadership of the church, entrusted to the board of elders, and the responsibilities include shepherding of the flock, providing administrative leadership, and exemplifying godly leadership. The elders shall be equal in authority. So that is the Constitution, so it has a much more broad statement. And then within the bylaws, you see that expanded greatly in terms of qualifications and then responsibilities. What shepherding the flock means, much more drawn out, and then administrative leadership, much more drawn out. Being an example of godly leadership, much more drawn out. So, does everybody know how an elder gets elected? No. Dalton's shaking his head. Okay. So, the election of an elder is in bylaws, Article 2, Section 1. And that happens, the senior pastor is always an elder on the board. That is with his role. But the elder selection process happens with the nominating committee. It starts with the nominating committee. They are in charge of selecting candidates to be put forth. And those candidates are then interviewed by the nominating committee. Then they are put forward to the elder board. The elder board interviews those candidates, and then they are voted on by the elder board. If that vote passes, then they are put in front of the congregation. The congregation has to vote for the elder to be approved by 2/3 majority of the vote. And those votes occur at our annual meeting.
And the nominating committee is made up of members of church that are also voted into that committee by the congregation.
The nominating committee is listed in the bylaws document and I can't remember section.
So it usually has an elder representative on it, and then usually 4 or 5 other people from within the church are brought forward for us to vote on. We vote yes or no to them. They become the nominating committee for the next election.
So when a pastor is elected, then Does the entire church vote during an
Yes.
annual meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
same
not
with
an
it.
annual meeting. When a pastor's called, we can vote whenever that call
You can
happens.
vote. Yeah.
Well, that makes
Yeah.
more sense.
A pastor's never going to be here without us voting for that pastor.
Yeah.
Do people tell you they want to be nominated, or do you just?
They make phone calls and
Oh,
The nominating committee
the
makes phone
nominating
calls.
committee goes through membership lists and makes phone calls and
He
talks
would
to
like
people.
to.
And, yeah.
I might be wrong on this, but doesn't the nominating committee actually nominates or puts up for a pastoral team, doesn't it?
A search team?
Yeah, search team, and so the nominating committee doesn't actually do the pastoral search.
Correct. They create a pastoral search
Correct.
team.
And then
And the search team interviews candidates. I've been on a search team before.
Okay.
We interview candidates, take in all the resumes, we interview people, and then we, as the search team, would then suggest who should go. And then usually what happens is we'll have like a congregational meeting, that candidate will come, and they'll have some smaller group meetings with staff and stuff. They'll have a congregational meeting where the congregation gets to interview that person, and then that ultimately ends in a congregational vote, up or down for that candidate. And if somebody's voted down, we start all over in the search team and bring another candidate, or if they turn it down after they're voted in, which has happened as well.
But both an associate pastor and a senior pastor are voted in by the congregation.
Yes, it used to be all ministry staff, it was all, like, children's youth associates, all that was voted in, and then back in the early 2000s, when the associate was, we had an associate for a short time, that was changed to just those two positions, and that youth and children's can be just hired. When we hired our last youth, we chose to have a search team and do it that way anyway, so, which we can, we just don't, it's not required by the Constitution anymore.
Zach, you had a question?
So, I saw this document out on the folder.
Yeah.
Proposal folder.
Yeah.
Is this the proposal constitution?
No, this is our current constitution. You can see at the bottom, it's approved on 9/17/2023. So that's the date that this version of the Constitution was approved. In 2023, we did some updates based on scripture references within the statement of faith, as well as language clarity, some language clarity within the document to make it less confusing, because there were some, what would you call it, Julie, like, I don't know, like not clear statements, vague, yeah, you were there too,
There's
Caitlin.
grammatical.
Grammatical errors, like within the document itself. So we did a really hard edit
Sure.
through the document to make it, much more clear.
So will there be a change to this for the proposal?
If the proposal was voted through, there would need to be a change to the Constitution
Okay.
to make sure the board, like all of the board changes that would need to happen, all of the, the pastoral leadership roles, like all of that would need to be changed within the Constitution to reflect the new structures that we would want to implement within the proposal.
Okay.
And a group of people would have to do that then?
Yes.
Is there like a constitution team
There is a Constitution team,
already?
yes.
Oh.
Do you want to be on it?
I'm on the elder board one.
The Constitution team was started before the proposal.
Yeah, the Constitution team was started before the proposal, because we had some, like back when Phil Nelson was chair, there was some initiatives to like look at the statements of faith more deeply. There was some statements of faith that people have felt are problematic and needed to be looked at more deeply, so that was part of what we wanted to get to. Because of some of the things and the timing, we haven't been able to get to, as a Constitution team, we haven't been able to get to them and bring them forward to the church to be voted on, to be focused on, to be discussed more broadly.
So there is an existing Constitution team. They're the ones that did that cleanup in 2023.
Yes.
They were working on statements of faith, which is again more just cleaning up language, making it a little clearer, that sort of thing. When the proposals started to happen, to come forward, then we decided to wait, because why go through all of that? If this goes through, then they would have to start all over, do another revision of the Constitution. So
Correct.
they're holding on some of that right now.
Correct.
I did notice, this is just nuts and bolts, but I did notice on our website, statement of faith does not have two statements of faith that are in the Constitution, the marriage and sanctity of life.
Yeah, we are looking at writing positional papers for those statements of faith, just because they can be. They were included. Paul, correct me. They were included back in 2014, or
Yes.
like 2012, 2014,
Yep.
when some of the, like, especially the marriage one, because there was tension about gay marriage and potentially churches being prosecuted for not being willing to perform a gay marriage ceremony. So that was a trend, like, more broadly in churches, and so statements of faith started being added toward that. Now, I believe we did a what would you call it, a competitive analysis, and saw that other churches in the area started dropping those statements of faith as well, in terms of sanctity of life, because there are broader issues besides just like what's in the statement.
Sure.
It's a more nuanced
It's a
issue
more
than
nuanced
bigger-
issue than
Makes
just
sense.
what's here. So having a positional paper that could expand on like what that means to our church would be more favorable than just 3 sentences.
Yeah.
And yes. Okay.
Specifically for the sanctity of life question, are we changing what we believe, or?
No.
No.
Okay, that's what I was,
No.
we took it off the website, just didn't know.
Yeah.
Again, just want a more detailed, nuanced ability to describe that
Yeah.
clearly, so that 3 sentences, people can sometimes take those in different directions, and
Yeah.
they'll be more clear about.
Yeah. Additionally, like what we are looking to get to with our statements of faith is like, what is our core? You know, what is our core? When we talk about our red bricks as a church, what is our core? And so that's one of the things that we wanted to, as a Constitution team, like bring up and have the discussion about like, what do these things mean as Chapel Hill, as believers in Christ? Like, what is our core? What we have 11 statements, I think it is right now. Is that too many? Like for us? I don't know. I don't know. But that could be something that we could say, is that too many? And look at them more holistically and say, could we distill that down to 5 and make that be more of like a solid core, just to be out there with like, this is what our church believes. Some of these other things, right, like Christian conduct, is that really a statement of faith? Is that something that like our salvation depends on?
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of conversations that we wanted to bring up as a Constitution team,
Got
to
it.
say like, does this make
So
sense
on
in
the
our
header of
statement?
statement of faith is just the pieces on the church and on the Trinity, on God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, and then there would be another link to like
To the
more about what we
positional
believe,
faith.
Yeah. Julie, what was the term that I think it was the Village Church that had,
I don't remember the exact wording, but basically, here's basically, this is what all believers
Yeah.
should believe.
Core.
And then here, understanding that some people might think differently, here's how we do it at our
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
and I've seen that on other church
Yeah.
websites that do it that way, just break it into.
so those are the kinds of things that we wanted to have more of a discussion.
That goes
So-
back to the pietist roots of this church, where we come from. That is very much the pietist sort of thing, like hold to the core beliefs and don't get too bogged down in differences, divide over things that are practices.
Right. And so to that, like, would those things need to be in our Constitution, or would the core just need to be in our Constitution? Right?
I'm not saying the same thing as practice.
Zach?
So, I'm trying to understand our overall relationship with Converge, I think it's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
So we don't have a hierarchy where Converge says you need to believe these. Do we, as a congregation, go and look at our beliefs and compare to what they have
Statement of
to
faith,
make
yes.
sure that we're still somewhat in a line
We have to
with
be aligned
them?
with the statement of faith of Converge to stay in Converge.
Okay.
Which is exactly what he's talking about, a very small, it's a core thing. You
Okay.
look at Converge website. We have to be within that statement of faith.
Because I know, like, if we go off of, like, Converge of, and we see from the churches that they allow women in leadership, and kind of bringing in, okay, well, what does that look like for Chapel Hill to maybe align with that? Where the Southern Baptist still does not. And just comparing, okay, where is that? We know that we don't have the top down, but do we do the bottom up to ensure that we're in somewhat alignment?
Think I understand?
Yeah, I think I understand too. Like, it's up to us to keep the guardrails on more than it's up to them. If that's what you're kind of
that's what
asking,
yep.
right? Like, yeah, I don't like. Does Converge do an audit of the churches that
Nope, they won't do that.
are affiliated with them? No, I don't
Right.
think so. So
There's an example of a church that used to be Converge. It's a well-known pastor, and he decided that he was moving further from those core beliefs, and so that church became Anabaptist. He left Converge voluntarily.
Sure. Yep.
I shouldn't say he decided, they decided. The congregation had decided.
Just kind of wondering.
Yeah, no.
Well, I was wondering that too. Okay,
They
he
had
decided. Okay.
The congregation decided to decide.
Sure.
Because they are congregational.
yeah,
But that would be true of the Southern Baptist Church as well. If they're, when you mentioned that exact Southern Baptist, we came from a Southern Baptist background, and they were autonomous churches as well, that kind of prescribed to, you know, the core beliefs of what the Southern Baptists believed. But within that, they also had things that, you know, the independent churches, they pride themselves on independence and their autonomy. So there's quite a bit of Baptist tradition, I think, in all of these ministries. They're not top down, they're more, each one is left to their own volition, so to speak, and within the confines of core beliefs and core fundamental beliefs.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess I would say just Southern Baptists maybe have a little wider core belief than we do at
Yeah.
BGC. There are certain things that they hold more core that we would say are not core.
Right.
And just a couple of examples of our interaction with, going back to the Converge thing, where we interact with them. I meet on a monthly basis with a group of Converge pastors. We have a group, we're basically on the northern edge of what we do. It goes all the way down to Owatonna. There's a whole bunch of pastors from Red Wing, Lake City, Farmington, Hastings, Faribault, Owatonna, here in Egan, a couple of us, including the Woodcrest pastor. We get together on a monthly basis, and we process things about what's going on in Converge, that kind of thing. We're very much on top of what Converge is facing. We will discuss things in terms of like, well, our church is kind of going in this direction or that direction, that kind of thing. We'll share that with each other. On top of that, there are things like when Peter was on staff years ago, he and I joined a 2-year pastor's cohort at Eaglebrook, and went through a whole training program for 2 years with other pastors. And so there are different ways that we're connected to Converge. Converge provided, during the transition between pastors, Converge provided pulpit fill for us during that time. We've had to navigate some difficult situations here. Converge has supported us with moderators that have come in and helped us navigate those things. So there is a relationship there. Again, they're not sitting there telling us, well, this is what you're preaching on next Sunday. But there's a great relationship there, and it goes way back. And that's sort of a little bit of a snapshot of the relationship that we do have. So.
Good.
Well, Bethel was part of that as well, in the
Mhm.
Bethel Seminary, which was put together originally to train up pastors for the Swedish Baptist Conference
Baptist churches, yeah.
and then BGC.
So if you've been coming to Wednesday night classes, the first person we had here, Jeanine Brown, is a seminary, Bethel Seminary professor. She's from that.
And then the Trout Lake Camp is also a benefit, I guess, of Converge.
Yeah, I think John Wick, who's the
Wickland.
Wickland.
We call him
Yeah.
Wick, but his name's
John
John.
Wick,
Yeah.
whatever.
I really like that.
They call him Wick, but he's the executive director.
Right now, he's the interim director of Converge North Central is in transition of leadership. And so John Wickland is currently the interim director of Converge North Central, but moving into a position of, I think, national Converge,
Okay.
potentially.
Eventually.
But we're in the process of finding a new executive director of Converge North Central.
Okay.
So John Wickland and Joel Nelson, who's the person I've been talking to, are both considered the transition team right now.
Okay. But Wick is also the camp director.
He was the camp director,
Was
now
the
James
camp
Rock is taking over that job. Which, if you've been to Trout, you know James. So.
Yeah. Name dropping, sorry. Okay, but back to like the elders. Each elder serves a 3-year term, and then they are up for re-election at the end of the 3-year term. So, yeah. If the elder is then moved into the chair position by 2/3 majority vote of the congregation, he can serve for an additional 3-year term.
It's like a 6-year spot.
So that's like elder rotation, elder election.
That's how it exists in the Constitution today. If you've
Correct.
read the documents, you will see a similar process in the documents we've got for the pre-board structure that is proposed right now.
Vacancy. So I put this in just because of where we are today. We have 4 elders, 3 lay, one staff person. So in the event that we need to fill an elder role, the Board of Elders can nominate a substitute.
A replacement
A
for
replacement
the terms that
for the remainder of the term. And that elder would then be up for election at the next annual meeting. So there has been discussion of if we need to do that. We have not determined if we need to do that at this moment, just for transparency on that point.
Currently, to be an elder, you need to be a member.
Yeah, you need to be a member. Qualifications of an elder.
To be on the vision board, governance board, or stewardship board, you need to be a member.
I think we put it in there.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we put it in there.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because currently ministry leaders have to be members. There are already things in place that would continue, yes.
Mhm. So. Mhm. Okay. Oh, here it is. That's where it is. Congregational vote, right? Like, so Converge has guidelines around affiliated churches and what congregations need to vote on. And that's election of senior pastor, election of one board, so you could have multiple boards on your church or committees, but election of one board and the approval of the Constitution. Our Constitution talks about congregational vote, and that's in the bylaws, Article 6, Section 6. And only members may vote. Anybody can attend an annual meeting, but only members may vote. And the vote of members present We did allow electronic voting during COVID. That was an update to the Constitution. Seeing that, hopefully that never happens again, but it was amended in the Constitution. And so that's how that happens. So when there are issues that are voted on, that's the voting process. And then I've added this is the last slide. Amendments. So, we can amend the Constitution and amend the bylaws. And for those things to happen, again, requires a 2/3 vote of the church members present. And things need to be posted in writing 2 weeks in advance of the vote. So, that means posted out in the foyer so people can see what is going to be voted on, what is going to be discussed, everything like that. So when we had this document, we had that, I'm pretty sure, at least 2 weeks in advance for people to grab copies of and look at and read and say, like, what's going on, ask questions about. I think we even had a meeting saying, like, this is what we're going forward with, so please bring questions, ask, so that, everybody is in the know about what's going to be voted on.
That's why we do the annual meeting packet 2 weeks in advance, because that's going to list the elders and the nominating people who are going to be voted on.
Yeah.
So that has to be put on the slap board 2 weeks before that annual meeting happens.
Do we
So
usually
that you
have
can
like
look at it.
a pretty good turnout in our votes?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Can't remember, feel like for the last annual meeting, the 2 elders that were up for re-election, Marty and Dale, I think, had over total votes, over 70, 80 votes each. You were counting with me back there.
I don't know, it was a long time ago.
So yeah, decent turnout. What did that slide on Sunday say? 113 members. So it's a decent, and that's present members, right? So like not every member comes, but it's members voting that are present, and 2/3 have to be present, or 2/3 have to vote for something to pass. So that is.
So 2/3 have to be present?
No.
100, 2/3.
There has to be a quorum, which I
Yeah.
don't know what the quorum count is right now.
It's 15%, so
50,
it's
yes.
Really?
15%.
That's very low.
15%
Of 100
constitutes
people,
a
but-
quorum.
yeah.
Okay,
50% of the membership.
Of members constitutes a quorum.
okay.
And then of that, 2/3 of the people who were there in the room that day have to vote yes to something or to vote yes.
Yeah. I did not get that in the slide. That was the last thing that I was about to put in, but I didn't get it in. Ron.
I don't know if you're gonna get to this, what you need to do to be a member, because one of the things I know that has been an issue with some people is the definition of baptism.
Yeah. So, and where is it? It's in 2 places. Because we have,
Page 2 ordinances.
yeah, section in the Constitution, Article 3. That's membership, but then also it's in the bylaws. Pretty sure it's in the bylaws. Oh yes, page 5, Article 1 in the bylaws, admission. Why it's called admission and not membership beats me. So in the bylaws, section 1, Article 1, section 1, it does talk about being baptized by immersion. We did add the line unless physical limitation precludes immersion. So if someone that would be like
If
physically
you've ever been to our
unable,
baptism, well, you have to go up some steps and down some steps
Yeah.
to get in, so.
like our
Or into a
specific
lake.
one,
Or into a
lake.
lake, yes. You couldn't wheel into a lake, I suppose, if you had
I,
that limitation.
I believe that Converge has a definition of baptism.
Part of being Baptist in Converge's mind is that we are baptized by immersion. That is part of being a constitutional church within Converge, is baptism by immersion is required for members. That is not a choice we make, that's a choice that is one choice Converge makes for us. As Joel said, being the good Baptist we are, we require that, because that's our biblical understanding of baptism is that. And so we require baptism by immersion to be a Converge church. That's right.
I mean, I was at a seminar a while back with weekday seminar with Paul and Jamie, and the idea of levels of membership
There are
came
many
up.
constitutions that have that.
There, like, if you want to be a volunteer, you can have one level of membership. If you wanted to be a ministry leader, you could have a second level of membership, right? So if you absolutely felt called to be a ministry leader, maybe baptism by immersion is the level that you need to be, right? Or like serve on the governance board, right? Like the highest level of service. Trying to get away from that, but the whatever role we could potentially dictate, like that level of membership based on something. So
I guess one of the things that comes up is we have some people who have attended our church who are very much involved in many things, but have chosen not to become a member because of the definition of immersion baptism, and it would be one of those things where
We don't require our volunteers to be members, so
Right.
they can
So-
volunteer.
yeah,
could they serve on different levels of the new piece? No.
not as we have it today.
Well, what about during the proposal? Not as
During?
we have it for the proposal yet.
Not as we currently have it,
No,
the
so
documents
to be a member, to
today.
be on the board, and to be a member, you have to be baptized by immersion. I got rebaptized by immersion when I became a Baptist as an adult.
But like, this is the last slide, I can't go down anymore. So if you want to like if you have questions about Constitution or any of the content within, we can definitely discuss.
So would the Constitution and bylaws be modified after the approval?
That is the thought, just because of the amount of work that would be required, like to rework a constitution now and the vote says no, like if the vote doesn't pass, well then that was a lot of work for nothing. So the idea is to wait and see how a vote would proceed.
A vote on a proposal would happen first, and then a vote on the Constitution would have to happen again later.
Right.
As after the Constitution is all fixed.
So we would actually have to vote on the change, but we really couldn't institute the change until we vote on a new constitution.
I don't think we could formally institute the change. What we'd like, so for instance, right now we do ministry team leader meetings. Those ministry team leader meetings are the vision board and the stewardship board. That's what they are. We would do them maybe slightly differently than we do them right now. So we would start meeting as those boards would look in practice right now without it being, we wouldn't formally adjust all the structure, but we would start to move in that direction if it's approved until the Constitution can be totally voted on. So the elders would be a transitional thing right now.
They would still need to be
Yes, they would
governing group
transition,
until we get
there would be
new
a transition
constitution.
time of that, yes.
You said something about the elder board can have a substitute. Who determines if it needs a substitute placement into the elder board?
The elder board.
The elder board.
The vacancies?
vacancies?
Yeah, the elder board would determine if we needed to
Is there-
add an elder to the
Is there a
board.
minimum?
The minimum is 3. So we are still three lay people within the board. So we are at the minimum right now.
And then that, whoever the elder board would choose to put on would only go to the end of that financial year. Fiscal year,
September.
sorry, fiscal year. So it's not like they're in perpetuity, like they would have to then at that next meeting, if they were choosing to continue, would have to be voted on. So it's not like they get, elder board picks them for a full term. It would just be.
You're saying currently the elder board determined that's not needed?
At this moment, we have determined that we're not going to bring anybody on.
Still, that being said, we're discussing.
Yeah.
Like frequently, right? It's not like,
Every month.
yeah, it's not like, no, we're not doing that. End in September to, October to September.
Okay, so if not, they'll be voted on in September.
Can we require that you all wear helmets and bubble wrap? Otherwise,
Right.
we will be running short teams.
That did run through my head when I was driving 6 hours to sit on a lake for a few hours and Marty was doing whatever in Mexico, so. You know how wild Marty gets in Mexico.
Would you say that if we voted on the changes that we're proposing, that the Constitution rewrite would almost be a given to be voted upon? I mean, we would go through all this to make these changes, to have the structure redefined, and congregation votes on that, we're all thumbs up with that, and then we get to the Constitution actual vote, and could there be a switch of I mean, people's hearts, and all of a sudden you're voting down a constitutional change after we've made this concerted effort to walk through this process?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, yeah, it could happen.
My guess would be that it would be over an issue in the Constitution, not the Constitution as a whole, and so then would we just have to rework,
That
do some
issue.
work to figure out whatever the issue with it that they had and rework that part of it. I don't know that the whole thing would get, I mean, if they voted on the board changes, then you'd think that the board structure has been righted, because that is what is written more or less. With, obviously, working draft, we all have places where you can speak into that right now, but the stewardship board, vision board, and governance board documents that are out there would largely be what the Constitution would describe.
Inform the Constitution.
That's what I would think as well.
Yeah.
It just kind of dawned on me, because it's 2 votes.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that we could potentially do is like, okay, let's vote on the statements of faith within the Constitution, right? Like, have that be like one vote. If we're gonna change the statements of faith at the same time that we're rewriting the Constitution, right? Like, is that a conversation that we would need to take up during this process, right? Is that a separate vote than the
Structure.
proposal structure, right? Like, that could be, right? And maybe there's like more discussion that would happen around that, or somebody be like, if you're wholesaling it together, well, no, I don't like the statement of faith change, so I'm going to vote down no to the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Robert's rule would be a subsidiary motion to the main motion, right? I think that's what.
Right.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, where have you been?
I had to remind myself because I'm like, how does this work?
Break out the book.
I know the timeline was thrown up on the slide last week.
oh, on Sunday?
But what is it? What is the plan for the vote timeline and all that?
Yeah, there was no date
Yeah.
on the vote. Just because we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and listening and having the conversations and making sure we're connecting with the people that we need to connect with.
So it will happen, but to be determined when.
The whole summer thing kind of puts a little bit of thing, because people are so busy in the summer. So it's like, you try to,
Do
is
you-
May enough time?
Yeah.
is September too much time, right?
Right.
And so I think it's, kind of trying to keep a pulse on it yet, so that's why we didn't put a date on it yet.
Partly it was there just to reassure you all that it will be a vote. It's not like, and I think Craig said it up front Sunday, no one's pushing this through without, like, that's part of why we wanted you to understand congregationalism. None of this can happen without you. It will be a vote.
It'd be interesting to see if membership takes up in the next couple of months.
On a meeting.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have full open doors and next steps, right? Like, yeah. Get this in.
Yeah, starting with coming up.
Is it full?
No.
No?
No.
The front door. Karen knows the sign-ups.
No, it's not because it leaks.
Karen's just doing aggressive screening. On
They,
it.
Nope.
they know the food. Oh.
Not approved. Sorry, you can't go.
Wait, who's the elder leading that one? Oh, he serves terrible food. I'm not going to that one.
Told me you don't have any power here.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts on the Constitution?
You got a half an hour before you can take your kids home, so might as well ask questions.
Just any questions?
Yeah.
What are your guys' experiences? So Laurie, you've been serving with this church for
5 years.
5 years. Greg, you've been an elder now for 3 years. What are your guys' hopes or dreams or joys or struggles as you go through this, as you think about the proposal? Do you guys want to share at all your personal experiences?
With the Constitution?
Constitution,
With
the
the proposal.
proposal, the structure,
You said ask any question.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there it is.
We're asking questions.
Looks like Paul's
They're
got.
supposed to be softballs, though.
Oh, yeah.
Paul's got his hand up back there.
Yeah, so one thing that I would like to see as a result of this meeting, of us getting more familiar with, I mean, how many of you read through the Constitution, all of it? Right, there's some, not many, right? So one of the things that I hope that we can create more clarity on over the next couple of months is really what is the role of an elder, what is the role of a pastor, how is that being played out practically versus what's actually written in the Constitution, those kinds of things, because a lot of this, I think you'll see, presses the issue of our leadership structure. It really does. When you look at what's expected, right? We put some broad categories in the Constitution. What we're asking as a church of our elders is astronomical, to be honest. And so get familiar with that. There are sections in here that you should get familiar with, particularly when it gets into the bylaws. Like go to page 6, Article 2, Church Government. Get familiar with Section 1 and Section 2 as those go through the next couple of pages. These are the kinds of things where I would love for you to learn what you can from the Constitution and then ask questions about how does this play out? What does this look like in real life? Because that's where, not now, Zach, I'm not asking for it right now. Yes, sir.
But that's my question. This is the current
Yes.
that's overwhelming
Yeah.
for the current elders.
Yeah.
The new proposal, how does that relinquish some of those burdens of, without a new proposal of a constitution, there's nothing to say, this is why we're doing this, to release some of these burdens.
Yeah.
The thought of approving one thing without seeing how it affects this document and these documents is a kind of that, yeah, okay, we approve this, but then we have this next step that's still the unforeseen, right? You're legitimately saying, get familiar with this document, yet this document, after a vote, is going away. What's then we have a proposal for a new structure. What's the proposal for a new constitution and bylaws to be able to say, yeah, I want to approve both of those. Know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
I hear you, so I just want to tell you a little about the process. And I don't discount what you're saying. What we did was we took this document and we tried to pull out everything that we've asked of the elders, and we made a long list. And if you were to look at the three-board structure, you will see much, I think all of those, I'd have to go back and look for sure, spread out amongst the three boards. So that's how it's relieving the burden, is like some of these things, the responsibilities are primarily for the other members. We expect everybody in those boards to be doing that. That's not just the elders who should be doing that. Obviously that should be happening now anyway.
Right.
Attending services, ministering to others in the body of Christ. Those are all things that we expect those boards to be doing, and we should see them in all of those documents. So what we did was we took that list, we tried to cover all of it throughout the three boards.
And I get that. One of the things that on Sunday morning that Greg brought up was that it's a high burnout rate for elders. Elders, minimum of 3 lay, up to 7, where the vision board minimum is 7.
Because that's the ministry leaders, yeah. That's how many ministry leaders we have in that area right now.
Okay, thank you. I didn't quite correlate that.
The spiritual formation side has a certain number, and I don't think the circle we put up had all the detail in it.
No, it didn't go into
So,
the
yeah.
detail. That will be on the website. We're adding a graphic that involves all those things, and we will do, I hear this, we need to clarify some of this. We definitely do, where we can lay out, like, this is the impact it will have on the Constitution. Those kinds of things, we can absolutely get clearer on that. We will, yeah.
As part of this proposal, maybe you guys have addressed this, but I know it's a challenge to get elders to even consider being nominated and voted on. And now when we're adding more leadership, what is the plan that's part of the proposal to get more people to want to be on those boards? Is there a recruiting plan kind of?
Yeah, well, that's part of the discipleship that we'll get to next week as well, but sort of answering Sigrid's question as well. So the thing that excites me about this is having been a ministry leader, and obviously I've been on staff for a number of years now as well, but having been a ministry leader, years and years ago, back when John was the pastor, the guy that was here for a while, we had an elder board and a deacon board, and that deacon board met quarterly. And I was like a part-time early childhood, just very part-time person. But being able to go to that deacon meeting where you were in a meeting with the other leaders and got to have that collaboration, that support, that was huge compared to what it has been since the early 2000s when we went to the ministry leader thing and didn't have that board structure for us. So I think that will be part of the new plan, is if these ministry leaders that are existing right now, the outreach leader, the women's leader, the men's leader, all have a board that they meet together with, that they then can support each other and collaborate with each other and know what's going on in the church. We will have a far stronger way to keep them, because they will feel a part of that community. That group will become a relational disciple-making group amongst themselves, and they will be empowered to go and look at their little teams below them, not below, but with them.
Right.
The women's team, who am I bringing up that could take my place next? That's the whole multiplication idea of this board structure. That's where we're going next week when we get into the disciple making stuff.
And I like the intention behind it, but listening to on Sunday, I got a little overwhelmed at the idea of quarterly check-ins to meet your objectives. I don't know if I want to be a ministry leader anymore if it means that it's so structured in this way.
I don't
not that I should be held accountable. That's not that, but it's just that seems now all of a sudden you make it so formal that I'm that doesn't sound fun anymore. It doesn't sound like that's where my passion's at, and it just feels. So I actually got a little overwhelmed listening to it. That's a lot, and I don't personally like it.
I think quarterly check-in, I think that's with the governance board thing, but
Yeah.
quarterly check-in means somebody's gonna come up and say, how's community groups going here?
Okay.
It doesn't mean like fill out a form.
Okay, good. It felt like how it was. I was
Right.
like, wow, this feels really like a lot. Yeah, like I don't sit down and have your review of how you're doing and how have you done. Did you meet your objectives? Are you slacking?
I mean, we do want people to think, we want them to think that we're all going in a direction together, and so
Yeah.
we want to have some, and we used to do this years ago, again, every time we did a budget year, we had goal setting, and we would have to put a number to our goals. It was sort of like, I don't know, throw a number on there, but it was a nice exercise to think through, what do I want to accomplish this year? That's what the annual meeting reports often are, is like, what am I looking to do, or what have I done this last year? It's that, it's not gonna be like this mass corporate structure thing,
I think it just brings in an intentionality, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna be a ministry leader, hopefully you're being intentional with your time and with the purpose of doing that, right? So if that's what's behind your heart in that space, that'll just come out, right?
Well, and if it is just someone chatting with you, I mean, it wasn't super clear. I'm like, that just sounds like a lot of work. So I asked.
And that's
I do
that's
think it
you
offers-
chatting with others,
Yeah.
right? That's not a top-down, you now answer to somebody on, right?
Right.
It's it's that together.
we're all working together
how are-
towards a common purpose.
Yeah,
Yes.
for instance, with the vision board, how are we in areas of spiritual formation and community building? How are we doing at moving this church forward into its potential, right? It's that conversation versus, yeah, I'm gonna score you
I
every
know.
time on
That's
that.
what it felt like. So
Yeah.
good clarification.
I just wanna like, I totally get it, like even just listening, I totally like in hindsight, I'm like, I could see how as a ministry leader, to me, like as an elder, I'm like, whew, like,
Yeah.
my load's getting less. But in our desire to show how is this new board actually gonna help with discipleship, right? I think then we're trying to list that, but I think it was trying to give so much information in such a short
Right.
amount of time.
Right.
Like somebody else has brought, another ministry leader kind of brought us up the same thing. I'm like, oh, looking back, I can tell how you ministry leaders might just be like feeling the weight on and on and on, right? Because now
Right.
it's like, because of how we were trying to lay out the why or the how's the discipleship piece going to happen, it did make it sound really heavy. So I do want to be like,
Yeah, well, I'm glad I asked because I was wondering about that. So.
Yeah.
For me, I want to be on a
Yeah.
team with you and talk about this together. I
Yeah.
don't want to be doing this by myself. That's
Yeah.
what it feels to
I
me.
think that's what I was gonna say, is you can view it as like, oh, this is one more thing as a ministry leader I have to do, I have to prepare for my quarterly check-in. But I think the other thing that we've heard from leaders in the past and have felt is alone. Nobody's checking in with me, I don't know what direction I'm supposed to be rowing. And so it's this wrapping your arms around from both sides so that you're not carrying a burden that you're not meant to carry, and that everyone's doing this together.
and
Now, that's the heart of the team thing
Yeah.
that excites me a lot, is being together
Yes.
doing this.
I think to come back to your question of like, how is this then unburdening elders? So rather than elders needing to have meetings with all of these ministry leaders to help unblock all of these ministry leaders, the ministry leaders are coming together without the elders being involved. And the ministry leaders are working together to help themselves, like, create an environment where they can be better disciples to each other and to their ministries. So that in and of itself is a huge burden off of the elders' shoulders, right? Because the elders are no longer responsible for all of the ministries associated with the church.
Would you say that as an elder right now, Greg, you guys even have a time to attend to the ministries?
No, we don't have a prayer lead ministry, like.
Well, I mean, like, as far as like shepherding ministry leaders, like, do you
Right.
guys even have the time to do that?
So the ministry leaders are the vision board, and who comprises the other board?
The ministry leaders for the finance team.
Finance,
Oh, okay.
facilities,
Okay.
administration,
So
so
those are
Sydney would be on
ministries
the
in
other
of
board,
themselves.
she's administration. And
that
then
makes
the
sense.
leadership development
Instructional.
stuff that currently doesn't exist, but we're hoping to develop, would be in that side.
one thing that kind of hit home with me with this is, probably a couple of years ago already, as meeting with a friend of mine from church that wanted to lead a Bible study, right, a men's study. And we're sitting by the fire, and he's like, but I want to know, like, where's the direction that we're going? Where does the elder board want us to go? And I was just like, I don't know, we don't have one, right? We don't have like everybody's gonna move this direction together. We don't have all the ministries moving this direction. It's like, I'd really love to do something with women's ministry and maybe kind of have tag team. Like, that's great, let's talk to the women's ministry people. But it's like, I felt horrible because I'm like, I don't know, right? And the elder board never had like the capacity, even if we had talked about it, like at times, like I said, like we'd have ministry meetings where it's like, yeah, let's do this. And the next thing you know, like, oh, it's budget planning season, all of our efforts go into budget planning, right? And so the thought of having our ministry leaders who hopefully have the capacity, because they're not worrying about budgeting season, to like kind of build that vision together, and they can be like, oh yeah, this would be awesome if our focus this month is going to be, we'll throw discipleship since it's easy, right? We're talking about it. Like, let's all move that. How do we, in each of our ministries, how do we make that happen? And how can we support each other? Like, now we got men's and women's ministry kind of in the same room talking to each other, and with outreach, right? And prayer team. How does a prayer team be lifting them up? So that's where I see this going. Because all I could tell him is like, well, Pastor Paul's going to be, I know his next sermon series is going to be on X, Y, or Z. You could do something with that. Sadly, I just felt like neither of us left that conversation around that topic feeling real satisfied, right? And so I have this great person who has this passion, but at the same time doesn't feel like he got the support probably that he was hoping to get for me.
Right.
So.
And then the board in the middle, sorry, I'm gonna keep talking for a second. The governance board in the middle is the one that gets voted on, right?
Yeah.
And their responsibility is,
Ultimately, the budget, like they
Okay.
approve the
Approval of the
budget.
budget.
okay.
And then, of Paul, like, so Paul reports to them. So if Paul has any, disciplinary issues or, those kinds of things, like, needs to.
So the role of like shepherding the congregation and that type of stuff that is currently on the elders, which board does that fall on?
So all of them, and the ministry leaders and like those kinds of things. I would also say, Paul
Yeah.
and the new associate pastor, the leadership development team, which doesn't exist right now. I think that's another opportunity for that team to come in to play and figure out like how can that team look at, with the associate pastor, opportunities to bring other leaders up, right? So you have the specific ministry leaders, how can I disciple within my own ministry? But the leadership development team and the associate pastor, like, what are other opportunities and gifts within the congregation to help people get plugged in to different areas? That's something that I find exciting, to go back to Sigrid's question. Like, this is a new area for our church to be exploring that has not existed. And so the opportunity to like do that more intentionally with a devoted team, with a devoted person, like that's exciting to me. And whether that speaks to specific shepherding or else like exploration of gifts and like helping people use those gifts, that is something
On a
that.
practical level, I get an email from someone saying that I have a mother-in-law that needs an elder or a pastor visit.
Yeah.
If we don't have traditional elders, is that all on Paul then? Or is there a
Good question.
pseudo elder, something that would fill that elder role? Because that has happened
Yes.
before people
No,
ask that.
That's a
And,
very
I mean,
good
I can
question.
just send it to Paul, but just wondering if there is a group like that is for
That is an area.
spiritual connection.
Congregational care is an area where that it would be developed within the spiritual formation community side.
Okay.
So I guess if somebody was thinking more traditional model and they're like, no, this needs to be a pastor elder,
Right.
then unfortunately you're probably
Then it has
go
to
to
be
Paul or an
Okay.
associate pastor, right?
Okay.
Or in this model, if Jamie's a pastor, into this model, if Laurie's title changed to pastor, does it just need to be somebody with that title? So I think it would just open up the options to it, right? And again, there is a need for congregational care. Like we've had some people a while ago, probably 2 years ago, I was in the library trying to meet with people, like, how do we do this? But then there was like that was right when community groups were starting, it's like, oh, well, they take it. And then, so again, there's still this need, so like, how do we kind of build that up yet? Yeah, so I still think that is something that we've definitely heard from people, like it's still lacking, right?
Paul's got something.
Just, one of the things to help distinguish governance board from the vision board and stewardship board. Currently, as things stand, one of the things that definitely makes us different from the New Testament church is that we own property and a building, and we have hired staff, we have a budget, all of these things, right? Those automatically become the urgent things. This is the tyranny of the urgent, right? Is that clearly like a biblical definition of what an elder does? Not so much, right? Overseer in general, right? The whole thing. But that's not what happened back then. But right now, what happens with everything funneling to the elder board is that has to be our priority. So in elder meetings, we have to answer all those questions. We have to do what a nonprofit organization has to do. And those kinds of roles in the proposed structure fall on the governance board, allowing vision board and stewardship board to focus on the shepherding, the congregational care, those kinds of things more clearly, with more representation and a broader reach than what can happen. And so that's where it differentiates things a little bit and focuses that. How do we run a nonprofit thing on a smaller group that will take care of that, but that doesn't have to overwhelm everything else that they're trying to do. It just breaks that up a little bit.
So would you not have anybody carrying titles elder or deacon?
In the proposed structure, no.
That seems odd. I mean, just the New Testament speaks of elders and deacons and responsibilities and what the life is supposed to look like. Why wouldn't you, you may have a structure that has 3 boards or whatever, but why would people not be carrying the responsibility of elder or deacon?
I don't think that the titles are, I don't think they're required. There's a lot of churches within Converge that no longer use those titles.
Seems odd to me.
I don't think that they're necessarily required, and I don't think that the way for instance, a current elder board in most of the churches that I'm familiar with anyway run is the elder that you described in the New Testament. The elder in the New Testament was a head of a household. And an ancient Near Eastern household was a group of families that were within that household, servants and extended families, and that was an elder, and they oversaw that household. And then some of those elders came together and made churches, and it's just a very different model than what we're talking about right now. So I don't think that title necessarily has to be used in modern day church.
So does it have to be thrown out though?
I think people have attached certain things to the title that make it hard to use in some cases.
What happened to the deacon board?
The associate pastor that we hired back in the early 2000s went to a different structure. He had ministry teams, and I have documents in my files, and there's these like bicycle wheels with circles all over, so he had ministry team layered on ministry team layered on ministry team, and they all reported to him. And then that position was eliminated, and we just left ministry teams without a structure really over them except to report to Paul.
So if we ever do another change of structure in the future, would it be all 3 boards? How would it, because right now the 4 elders and the E team are really doing all of the work for this. So in the future, where would that even be?
Oh, to make
if there was to be this type of change in the future, which board, would it be all 3 of them meeting together, or?
Probably.
Yeah.
Sure you haven't thought about the next structure change, but just thinking down the road.
A little bit, right? A little bit, because they have like the 5-year, what is it called?
5-year strategic plan.
Strategic plan.
Okay.
It's
So
built
where
into this
the
new
group
proposal.
gets together. So theoretically, it could be like, okay, every 5 years,
The
what we're
boards
doing
would-
makes sense.
And there might be times in those 5-year strategic plans, the boards would meet, and then we would have we did this way back 25, 30 years ago. We would do a Saturday where we would have a the congregation come together and we would do strategic planning together and get input from the congregation, and then the boards would take that and from that input would move on and create this 5-year strategic plan. We're looking to go to something a little more like that again, which has really just fallen to the elders over the last 20 years probably.
Zach?
So, on page 6 of 10, the qualifications of an elder, the board of elders shall be composed of men who conform to the qualifications of the spiritual leaders as set forth. Is the goal to help utilize the spiritual gifts of everybody when it comes to these next 3 boards? Or is it still geared towards men only, of trying to, it sounds like the ministry leaders are anything. What about the 3 boards?
The boards are going to be made up of a ministry leader from women's, and a ministry leader from men's, and a ministry leader from outreach, and a ministry leader from community groups. So they will be, those ministry leaders will be that board.
So it's utilizing the spiritual gifts of the people that are actually doing the ministry.
Correct.
Yes.
Not relying on 4 to 7 men
Correct.
Correct.
That is
to
the heart
do
of the
everything.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
praise God. I mean, we are all the church.
That is really the heart of the change. We are all the church. How do we all participate in that? Using what God has given us, each of our own unique talents. That's exactly what we're teaching the kids upstairs today. Use your, whatever God gave you to be unique, to make a difference.
We don't know how much they learned from our acting skills.
Looking at Lydia's friend right here.
Use your gifts to build up the church, to make a difference in the world. And that's what we're looking for. Use your gifts to make a difference in the world, to restore, to redeem the mission God called us all to be a part of. And how do we best structure for that? And this is our attempt at that best structure.
So the governance board would do the distribution of the carrying fund, or would that be the other one? But that would be
Carrying fund would be governance board.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the elected one is the one that actually makes money decisions,
Yeah.
final decisions, I should say.
I mean, the finance team would be part of the stewardship board, and they would make recommendations to the governance board in terms of budget and stuff like that. The governance board is that, again, this is the
Official
legal
government,
stuff
yeah,
that we have to
that
do.
can sign off on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a ministry leader, you are ministering, and then you are also meeting on a monthly basis as a group, and then you would also, some out of the 2 from vision and 2 from stewardship would meet again for the governance.
When as needed. I think we have that one in there as quarterly, I believe, if I remember correctly.
I think that's gonna encourage us to build our teams. Because if I'm Eric and I'm in charge of the finance team, and then I all of a sudden have to go to another meeting, I need to delegate. just
And that is, again, part of
wonderful.
discipleship. That is how we're
Yeah.
bringing people along, is delegating it out, sharing the burden with each other. And we have to think about discipleship not as walking through a program to learn the Bible, but how do we live out our Christian life with someone else and show them that? And we'll get into that more next week, but
I know, Laurie, last week, or on Sunday, you mentioned that this proposed structure falls within the confines of what is deemed acceptable by Converge. Do you know if there's any other, and I also heard you say that there was a lot of surveying what other churches are doing. Is there an example of this structure being put in place anywhere?
I wouldn't say there's an
else, or-
exact example. I do have some other constitutions that Joel has given me with multi-board structures.
Okay.
If you look at Calvary Church Roseville, and I don't know exactly what all of these responsibilities, they have a strategic team, an engagement team. There's another one, I can't remember what it's called, but there, again, lots of these places are doing board structures that are some other than an elder deacon. And so
Okay.
we have, Joel Nelson, who's the transition team guy, has given me access to a number of constitutions that represent some of these different boards. Some of them are a little more traditional, some of them are less traditional, but we have been looking at those.
Yeah, because it just seems like a lot of these challenges wouldn't be unique to Chapel Hill, right? So I'm just wondering how much of the, like, we're looking outside of Chapel
Yes.
Hill for, like, are we recreating the wheel here, or are we coming up with our own?
Yeah, no, we're not completely recreating the wheel by any means. And any of those constitutions I have passed on to Greg, because he's leading the constitution team, so that they can look through them and take from them what they can to help us build the new constitution if we get there.
And from what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but the churches that we talk to about these types of things, they're encouraged by what they're seeing. They're flourishing in this mode of
Sharing
operation,
leadership.
sharing things. Yeah,
Is that kind of
versus-
feedback something, we could all get to? I think that would be helpful, to your point, Bob. I think that'd be great to hear which churches of similar size, of similar structures, what have they found to be helpful? What have been some of the hiccups associated with it? I just think that it would put people's minds at ease with the change.
Right.
That would just be feedback.
Yeah, it's kind of like you want to buy a product, it's like a reference call, you know? You want to talk to somebody else who's done it.
I have a few emails out to a couple of these churches. I haven't heard back from all of them yet for specific, like I can look at their website and see what the teams are. My father-in-law, who had worked in Converge North Central and Converge National for a long time, has given me some stuff, but I don't have direct stuff from some of them yet.
Okay, because my question to that too was just the size of the congregations too. I was trying to do just my own little searching around and to find different structures, but churches are, it's not apples to apples, right? Because of size and the number of people that can serve. So I think it would be helpful to see, are there ones that are our size congregation with this type of model? What have they found successful? What have been the pitfalls?
I think one thing that we've been talking about in some of our meetings has even just been like this is a compliment, but sometimes Chapel Hill, within our smaller size, is almost trying to offer the programming that like an Eagle Brook or a huge church does, right? So potentially, if we have more communication between our teams, can we like take out some of our programming? Like, do we need so much, right? And so again, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think that's just something that it just kicked to my head because you said like comparing ourselves to other churches. I mean, that's one way that as we look at what we're trying to do at Chapel Hill, it's like we're unfortunately this, I don't know if this is like a business of a church where you're trying to compete with other churches, and we need to be able to offer all these things, right? And so one benefit potentially if we start to have our ministry leaders meeting, what are our goals that we're trying to get to? Is there potential for less stuff or whatever, but less stuff could equal more discipleship, more space,
More impact.
right? So now I have more time to get together with people because I'm not worried about, am I attending X, Y, or Z event that's going on all the time, right?
Streamlining is definitely on the radar. As we start to work together towards a single purpose, streamlining is definitely on the radar there.
Bill, you're done.
Bill, you know there's
It is,
getting rid of my
so we're gonna have to go get kids.
Yeah.
You're done,
Okay.
Bill.
Elise is up there by herself. so-
Okay, do you want to pray real quick and dismiss us?
Sorry,
All right, thank you, Laurie.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. Thank you for this group of people who love the church and who love you and who really just want the best for how we go forward, Lord. We pray that they would be able to look through the documents, to read the Constitution stuff, to just give us the feedback that will help us to design this in the best way possible, that your Spirit is in it and that we're moving in a direction that you want us to go, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you, everyone.